Hello everyone. In this video I am going to talk about some book recommendations because I made a list in an old video about what courses to look at, and I'm going to try and do my best to come up with some good recommendations, but most of the books that I read are just famous books that you can find on the internet from a simple Google search, so I'm probably not going to tell you anything you don't already know. So in front of me you can see I have a calculus book. This is somewhat old. I think this was printed in 1990 and it's in pretty good shape. It's actually belonged to my dad and he let me have it. Well, I mean, I kind of just took it from him, but I know he doesn't really care because I use it to study my calculus. I know that okay, so there are the authors, Edwards, Larson, and Hostetler. But I know Stewart has a famous calculus book that I think most institutions use, but maybe not. It depends on the institution, obviously. But this is an older book, so you can see the chapters in it. So if you're studying calculus, I would say that this book is really good. I like everything in it. I like the flow. So I recommend it. So instead of just saying get the Stewart book, which is a good book. I used it when I took calculus. But this older book, if you can find it, I would recommend. And if you're going to study calculus and you're going to use this book, I would say that chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, and maybe 5 would constitute Calculus 1, if you can get through those 5 chapters. For Calc 2, I would do 6, 7, 8, 9, and finish up with 10, I think. That would be Calc 2. Chapter 10 is pretty small. And then for Calculus 3, it's pretty much everything else. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And there is a 17th chapter, which starts talking about differential equations, but I would just skip that chapter, and I would instead just get a book on differential equations and use it. So overall, I like this textbook. This is the 4th edition. I'm pretty sure this was printed in 1990 and is in pretty good shape, as you can see. So that was calculus. What do I recommend for elementary linear algebra? I don't really have a good textbook in elementary linear algebra. But if you're going to do advanced linear, which I may as well write this stuff down. Get my pen. So let's see here. Calculus. Stewart is good, but then there's the book I just recommended. So that's Larson, Hostetler, Edwards. So those are 2 good calc books. They're very similar. If you can't find this one, the Stewart one's just as good. And then for linear algebra, I would recommend the Axler book, which is called Linear Algebra Done Right. I like that book. Sheldon Axler's the author. I like the way he writes. Let's see here. So math proofs and DiffyQ. I mean, for DiffyQ, I really only know one book that is used in DiffyQ, and I believe it's the Tenenbaum book. Let me look. Tenenbaum and someone else. One of the authors is Tenenbaum. The books. This book, it's the only one I know, so it's the way I'm used to it, but there's got to be better ODE books than it. It's kind of old. I think it was written in 1963, and it hasn't been updated since. Because there's problems in here that uses imperial units that no one, like today, still uses. I mean, America still uses the foot, pounds, ounces system, which I'm used to. But in here, there's, like, they use this unit called slugs to measure mass. I don't know anyone else that measures mass in slugs except for this book. Everyone uses the metric unit, kilogram, these days. But that's what I would, but I guess that'd be my one recommendation for ODE because it's the only one I know. And then for math proofs, there's a pretty good book on math proofs. What's the author's name? Hammock? Harnock? I think it's Hammock. Looking at my shelf. It's a short read, it's pretty cheap, and I think it does a pretty good job. Someone in another math department, not at the institution I'm at, he had a copy of it, and I saw it, and I bought a copy of it, you know, like a few weeks before meeting him. And I said to him, like, hey, I just bought that book. What do you think of it? And he goes, I don't like it. And I was a bit surprised to hear him say that because I thought the book was really good. So, buyer beware. Again, it's not that expensive. So that's math proofs, calculus, linear algebra. I unfortunately don't have good recommendations on geometry. I'm still trying to find a good geometry book. Okay, I guess we'll talk about modern algebra. And for this one, I recommend the Hungerford book. Thomas Hungerford. He's got two books. He's got the baby algebra version and the graduate level. I called undergrads babies. The undergraduate version and the grad school level version. And this one, I'm recommending the undergrad level version. I like the way he writes. Hungerford is, in general, a pretty good author. Whoa. Okay, and then for real variables, the undergraduate version, you can see I have my big stick stack of analysis books. I recommend this guy, the green one, Bartle and Sherbert. So for this one, Bartle and Sherbert. That's a pretty good book. And let me think. What else did I recommend the other day? Complex analysis. Complex analysis. There's a couple good books. There's the Alfers book, which I think is accessible to undergrads. There's the Churchill Brown. That book is also pretty good for undergrads. And if you're going into grad school level complex analysis, then I would recommend the Stein book. Stein and Shakarchi. They have a book on complex analysis. I think it's more suited for like complex analysis 2, where they talk about like entire functions and asymptotic growth. They talk about elliptic functions in there. It's well written, but again, I don't know if I like the topics in it or not. But there's another book called Lectures on Entire Functions. And the author is Boris Levin. I might check that book out too. Definitely a grad school level book. And if you want to do abstract algebra, which is the grad school level version of him, Hungerford also has a good book, but it's not my favorite. I like his undergrad version better. And the one that I would recommend is the Isaacs book by Martin Isaacs. The algebra book by Martin Isaacs. So this one I like. What else do I like? There's a book, now that I'm thinking about complex analysis, there's a book by Conway that you can find on the internet. I have not read it, but from the table of contents and the way they go through it, I think it looks promising, so you might want to check out the Conway book. All right. Conway here. I was just thinking, is this an algebra book? And it's not. I'm thinking of Conrad. Conrad writes the algebra book. Conway is the complex analysis book. And then you can talk about graduate level analysis. And I have a couple recommendations. My favorite's the Royden book. Royden and Fitzpatrick. Royden Fitzpatrick. Another good book. Well, Kolmogorov's good. I'm going to put Kolmogorov. And then what else? I'm not going to recommend the Stein book, even though it is well written. I'm thinking about the topics that show up. I'm going to leave it there. I like these two. And if you want a measure theory book, well, okay, I guess measure theory's in here. But if you want functional analysis, then I would recommend the Kriesig book. I hope I can spell his name right. Which you can find for free on the internet. Very well written book. Sometimes the notation makes me roll my eyes, but the book itself is pretty dang good. So, did I miss anything here? Is this a good list to study? I know I'm not talking about every single course I took at the grad school level, but I think these cover all the major bases. So we started with calculus, advanced linear algebra, ODEs. I don't know any PDE books to recommend. Math proofs, so the Hammock book I like. Modern algebra, there's Hungerford, Bartle, and Sherbert. Looks to me like I've made the most recommendations for complex analysis, even though I don't have very many books on it. I have this book. I'm familiar with this book, I just don't own it. This one I am familiar with. I read some of it, but never finished it. And this book you can find for free on the internet. And let's see here, Hungerford. I prefer the Isaacs book over Hungerford. I like the way that this guy writes. Hungerford, I mean, it's good. It's just I'm used to the way Isaacs writes. And then for analysis, so like measure theory, which is usually in an analysis book, I really like the way Royden and Fitzpatrick write. And then for the other stuff, I would recommend Kolmogorov. Although Kolmogorov could also go down here. In which case, if you want another measure theory book after Royden, then I would probably recommend the Whedon book. Whedon and Zygmunt. And you know what? I'm going to throw in the Stein book. Because the measure theory stuff in that book is really good. So that's it. That's my book recommendations. Let me know if there's a good book out there that I missed. I'm guaranteed to have missed it. I know that there's 2 measure theory books by Halmos and Bogachev. I tried reading Bogachev, but it's rough, and I don't recommend it. The other one, shoot, I just said his name and I just forgot. Halmos. I started reading it and I lost interest really quick. I think for measure theory, I might just stick with my Whedon book. But Royden Fitzpatrick is by far my favorite for those subjects. Anyway, let me know what you think.